Hello, degens and degenerates. Welcome to another episode of Man Buns and Jesus. As you can see from Josh's face, he didn't know that was coming.
I gotta let you know, almost no one watches the video of this. So most of the people who are hearing this cannot see the look on my face.
Fair enough. But you've
It
now
was
heard
one of
both of our
shame for anyone who didn't see it. I was ashamed of what Ben just said. Deeply, deeply ashamed.
now you've heard our voices. I'm Pastor Ben Olschlager here in the great state of Michigan. That is Pastor Josh Laborious down there in the flaming hellhole that is California.
I'm pretty sure you can't say that.
I'm kidding. Uh, we're enjoying a nice winter day here in Michigan. Josh is complaining
Same.
about days in the 70s.
What are you talking about? I'm enjoying a nice winter day here in SoCal.
uh, but we are setting ourselves up for an interesting episode here today. And to give us a little background on why we're talking about what we're talking about, Josh wants to lead us off today with a little story of personal experience.
A little anecdote. Well, I mean, even before I get to my anecdote, the reason we're doing this is we admit that last week's episode was just
10 ply.
very
It was 10 ply.
agreeable. It was super soft. And that's not what you come here for. You come here for the spiciness. You come here
Un
to get
poquito
offended a little
picante.
bit. You come here because we're willing to say things that most people won't say to you. So we said we want a spicy episode today. Oh, we got a good one for you today. um, and today we're talking about economic policy. And you say that doesn't sound spicy. What if I phrase it like this? We're talking about capitalism. And the anecdote I have for this is I've had an interesting journey when it comes to how I look at capitalism and other economic systems. Okay. So when I was a kid, I was very go capitalism, right? Go like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of thing. Um, and then probably in undergrad, which is oh so basic for me to think, to kind of feel a shift. I wouldn't say I wanted to be socialist or anything, but like
You at
I
least
came
start to see the
across
flaws.
I came across verses in the Bible that said like they had everything in common and they sold everything to give to others, and I was like, is the Bible advocating for socialism? But then I was sitting in a class in seminary, and a professor I respect very much brought up this verse from 1 Corinthians 16. It says, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so you also are to do. On the first day of every week, each of you is to put something aside and store it up, as he may prosper, so that there will be no collecting when I come. And when I arrive, I will send those whom you accredit by letter to carry your gift to Jerusalem. And you might say, what does that have to do with anything? Well, here's what it has to do. The church in Jerusalem is the one where it said they were all selling all their stuff, and everybody shared alike and shared together. They were like practicing socialism. And my professor pointed this out. He's like, this is saying it didn't work. Like, this is saying they ran out of money. Like, they could not, it was not sustainable what they were doing. Um, I was like, oh, well, that's a valid point. And then I've been going through the Proverbs recently with our daily devotions at Edgewater. Brothers and sisters in Christ, there are a lot of Proverbs that to say something to the effect of, if you don't work, you shouldn't eat, or if you're not willing to work, and our catechism makes an important point. They're like, If you're unable to work, the church should take care of you, but the willingness should be there. So that's been my kind of journey, and I've landed in a place where like I acknowledge that no matter what the economic system is, it is going to be broken to some degree. But I do genuinely believe that capitalism is probably the least prone to critical failure, is how I want to phrase that. So we're going to talk about capitalism today. And I really hope, Ben, you're not on the same page as me because then this is going to become a lot less spicy right away.
I
Dang it.
I'm on a lot of similar pages to you, but I don't know if I would consider capitalism the least prone to critical failure.
Oh, thank goodness.
So I that being said, I don't know what is. So that's kind of an exploration we're going to have as we go through this episode. And also for those of you who are thinking today that we're going to be talking a lot about capitalism and then never mentioning anything else, that's true. We're not focusing on socialism or
Socialism
authoritarianism.
will probably receive the second most discussion in this show. I think we can agree that communism has never really worked out and
Mhm.
it's not something worth pursuing.
Nor
Because
nor
every
has
time communism has cropped up in history, the Christian church gets like pushed out of the country. So we're gonna say maybe that's not the route we want to advocate for.
we're also not going to push too much into like pure anarchy either. Uh
Anarchy!
as, as fun as that is. Uh
Ben, I
when
got a YouTube show that I gotta send you after this. I'm
Okay.
not gonna say it on air, but you will appreciate it.
Okay.
And
Sounds good.
the anarchy in that intonation is a quote from that show.
Okay. Noted. Um anyway, so to kick us off today, I kind of want to like define capitalism. Um and we're like probably for better or for worse, um we're very familiar with the United States version of capitalism. We've grown up in it, we've experienced it quite a bit. Um we
America.
we as much as you are listeners, because I don't think we have any international listeners that I've seen
We
other
have a
than
couple Canadian listeners, but that's
and that one guy in Brazil, right?
probably a couple guys in Brazil,
Okay.
honestly.
Anyway, um
Hey, Alan.
yeah. um our mostly American listener base is also going to be fairly familiar with a lot of the things we're describing. And what we want to kind of play out in this is like there's no perfect system. There is not going to be a perfect system, but it's worth us acknowledging as people in the church, where the weaknesses are in the system of economy and government that we live, so that we as the people of God can do what we can to fill the needs that exist. Um, Within the United States, we live in a free market capitalist system. It is almost entirely market driven. There are some government checks in place to monitor things like the stock market, different like product safety things. Like you can't just sell 3-year-old meat. Um, that's probably a good thing.
Not for
Nobody
very
likes,
long, anyway.
yeah, nobody likes the runs. Um,
The twins do.
anyway, uh, and so that's the world we're speaking to. Um, so Josh, do we should we start with like some of the things that we see as genuine strengths of a free market system, or should we start with the spicy takes?
I'm gonna go with somewhere in between.
Okay.
And this is probably actually the crux of why I believe capitalism is the least prone to critical failure, from like a moral perspective, because capitalism relies on the worst parts of human nature, which also means it relies on the most consistent parts of human nature. Because capitalism assumes that people are going to make decisions in their best interest, that they are going to be selfish, and that greed is a motivating factor. I believe those are two pretty darn good assumptions to make about humanity. And because capitalism operates on those assumptions, I think it's prone to success because those assumptions are going to be true. Which on the flip side, I think is a weakness of socialism and um, other economic policies in that way because it assumes the best in people. For socialism, like from a government perspective, you're assuming the government is going to do the right thing. Historically, that is a bad assumption. Human nature says that is a bad assumption. If you give people the freedom to do the wrong thing, a lot of times they're going to do the wrong thing. That's what we confess. We confess that we are broken and sinful by nature. Um, so we have that, and socialism also assumes that people will make worse decisions for themselves for the sake of others. Again, you're running against the grain of human nature here. So I think one of the greatest strengths of capitalism is it acknowledges the reality of what humans are and says, okay, let's build a system that works as well as possible, given that these are our weaknesses. Um, that's what I think is capitalism's greatest strength, is that it acknowledges the brokenness of our human nature, and then tries to make that constructive.
I'm going to disagree with you here.
Ooh,
So I think realistically, all that capitalism really does in terms of the way that it uh, distributes power in the market is it takes that power away from like government entities and puts it into the hands of individuals and corporations who are themselves run by sinful and broken people.
correct. But sinful and broken people who need their consumers to continue.
Yes, but
So
you've
they're relying on they're making the issues of the consumer. They're making the success of the powerful contingent upon the well-being of the consumer.
that's not entirely true though. If you just look at the the very fact that the principle of monopoly exists, and I'm not talking about the board game, I'm talking about the like overtaking of a market. This is a relevant and random modern example, but there is currently some rumbling in Congress and in other places of power that Ticketmaster should be um, taken down because it's a monopoly over the sale and resale of electronically purchased tickets for sporting events and concerts. And all of this is because of the exorbitant prices at Taylor Swift concerts. I love that this is a story, and it just makes me giggle every time I think about it. But like they control, I think, 90 to 95% of the market share when it comes to ticket sale and resale in the electronic space. And they dominate when it comes to original sales because they have contracts with just about every of the major sports leagues, as well as with a lot of the big record companies and production companies for tours for musicians and stuff. Um, and so they can charge exorbitant fees to the people buying tickets, and there's nowhere else that people can go if they want to like purchase those tickets. Um, anyway, all of that is to say, like, we don't necessarily need concerts. We don't necessarily need sporting events, but a single company took over the market in that particular space, found a way to pump it for as much money as they possibly could, and they're not at all concerned about the well-being of their consumer. They're just concerned about how much money they can get out of it. Um, and imagine if that happened, I don't know, in the banana industry. Uh, like all of a sudden,
Why did
one
you have to
company,
pick bananas?
what?
Couldn't have said the apple industry,
No, 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 no.
the orange industry, the broccoli industry.
See, I chose bananas strategically because they basically all need to be imported. You can really only grow them in the United States in Hawaii. Um, I think very southern tip of Florida can sustain some of it too, but it takes a very specific climate. So you have to import basically all of your bananas. And it'd be fairly easy for a single company to dominate the market share of bananas to the point where they could kind of start to fix the price and could make an absorbent amount of money uh, provided that people continue to buy bananas, which bananas are pretty commonly eaten food. And I think a lot of people like them enough that people would continue buying them, but they'd get priced out in some to some level. Um, and you could apply that to just about anything. Or another example, um, diapers, baby diapers. They're incredibly expensive because there's like two or three companies that dominate that market. Do they have the best interest of their consumers at heart? I don't think so, because they're just charging exorbitant fees for something that they know parents will continue to need. Do kids never ever stop pooping? No. They eventually learn how to do it in a toilet, but until that happens, they need to keep buying diapers.
So I will concede that yes, there's obviously room for abuse. But my counterpoint is that I do believe a rising tide, no. Is it a rising tide lifts all ships? Is that the phrase?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because the reality is these innovations, um, they're taken advantage for a while, um, but the technology or whatever at some point becomes ubiquitous, and the innovation that is driven by that desire to make more money, I think eventually benefits the society as a whole. Are there problems along the way? Yes. Are there significant problems along the way? Yes. Ticketmaster is the worst. But um, I I do believe, and this is probably I would prefer an effective system with flaws to an ineffective system with like socialism. Yes, your people can take advantage of the system less easily, which I don't know is true. Taking advantage of the system just looks differently,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Different people are taking advantage of the system, um, but there's definitely an argument to be made that the efficacy of socialism is way less as far as like the research and development that gets done. Like capitalism and greed drives innovation, and yeah, sometimes that means everybody's getting screwed, but sometimes that means you have Elon Musk who's like, oh, I want to make everything, like I want to make electric cars feasible, and he might actually pull it off. Um, he's like, I want to make space travel sustainable. Like he genuinely wants to put people like colonize Mars. He might pull it off. Like he would not. No single entity would have the resources to try something like that in a socialist system, right? Because the amount of money he's having to throw at these projects to try and accomplish them is absurd. Like I can't even picture it. I can't even imagine how much money that SpaceX or that Tesla goes through. Um, so I'll concede, yeah, there are definitely places where people are taken advantage of. But I think it's a rising tide lifts all ships kind of situation.
This is where again, like I don't think that there's a like I don't have a preferred system of economic structure because you're I mean you're absolutely right. Like there are fundamental flaws with socialism that kind of start with some of the assumptions they make about human nature. But I think in order to like truly have a capitalist system, you need to make some of those same assumptions about the people that are going to run industries and about the resiliency of hang on, I need to take this call.
Okay. While Ben does that, I'm gonna, go after it. Um, so one other Ben is right. You have to assume that the people in who accrue all this wealth are going to use it well, um, which is why I think that the freedom of the market is a really critical piece of capitalism, right? Because what it means is there is a line that if they cross, they will lose their business. Um, with Ticketmaster, they're getting real close, right? Um, like you can push people so far, but there is a point where they're gonna say it is not worth it. I am gonna and in the instance of like a billionaire, say the owners of Walmart suddenly were doing evil experiments and it became very public, like there is a line where the population decides, no, you have gone too far. We're going to shop at Target instead of Walmart. Um, and Walmart tanks, the company fails, whatever. So I believe because it's a free market, there is a line where that morality or immorality is checked. Whereas the people who are positioned in like a socialist economic system, the government, uh, there's really not a great recourse when they decide to not do well because the system is built for them, and there's not as much freedom um, by design because the market controls are in their hands. So um, yeah, I think for capitalism to remain a morally tenable system, it has to be part of a free market because the consumer has to have the choice to say, no, you have crossed a line, you have gone too far, you have taken too much advantage of this setup. I'm not going to contribute to your business. Um, and you might say, oh, there are companies too big to fail who like that would never happen to, but I don't think that is the case because we've seen really big companies fail. So I don't know if you heard any of the things I just
I
said.
didn't.
So,
Sorry, I muted you
oh,
completely.
good, good. Carry on with whatever you were saying.
Where was I? Oh yeah, I don't have a like preferred system in mind, but I agree with Josh. There are fundamental like errors in judgment about the very concept of human nature that base socialism. But I think you make those same fundamental assumptions about the people that run the corporations in a capitalist system. And I think you underestimate the ability and the resilience of people within that capitalist system to adjust when changes are needed. Um, an example
I
in
underestimate or I overestimate?
you overestimate, sorry. Um, an example I'll make now, um, or based on like kind of
That
where
was
things are at now.
that was very robotic.
Yeah,
I will
no,
make an
on
example
where
now.
things are at now. Sorry.
Example loading.
So in our modern day and age, right, we're very reliant on um mostly large scale farms raising a lot of our food. Um, if there was a day and age where all of a sudden that system collapsed, um, a lot of people wouldn't necessarily have the ability, the know-how, the the opportunity, the space to um, either grow their own food or source their own food another way. Um, so like in my mind, oftentimes within capitalism, we kind of exist on the brink of large parts of our economy collapsing and leaving us with a lot of areas of need. Um, like I know it's probably not going to happen because we attempt to kind of shore up our resources against this, but say we had a drought and a locust infestation such as they did during the Dust Bowl during the recession or the Great Depression in the 1930s.
We do have a
Uh,
drought. We've had a drought for 3 years. That's what the commercials keep telling me.
I know they're experiencing drought in California. There are real problems there, but like imagine we experience that kind of like horrendous drought of the Dust Bowl era, and all of a sudden our agriculture industry collapses, uh, and people don't have the wherewithal or the know-how to really respond to it in a way that is effective. That would be disastrous, and I think a lot of that is like predicated on how hard we push some parts of our system because of the fact that we're in a capitalist system. Um, and so again, this is me just pointing out that there's problems and not offering a solution.
Oh yeah, they're
Because
they're well, and I think if we're honest, I think regardless of your system, there has to be like there's it could work on the right conditions.
Mhm.
And with our capitalist system, I think the conditions by which it works best is when those who actually when anyone within the system is taught compassion and generosity. So there's this going back to my story at the beginning, right? They're taking up a collection for Jerusalem because Jerusalem doesn't have any money left because they sold everything and
They were also
they're just
experiencing, from my memory, they were also experiencing some sort of disaster. I
I
think it was a
believe you are
drought, maybe,
correct.
and that was what
Um,
ultimately pushed them over the edge.
so what man, my train of thought just left the station and I was
Sorry.
still standing I was still buying popcorn. Um, so there's this generosity, there's this giving, but it's not mandated, I guess. So what I would say is that kind of the ideal here is that in our capitalist society, the church teaches people to care for the less fortunate. And you might say that sounds like socialism. No, it's not socialism because no one it's not forced by like no one is controlling the market to do this. It is we have taught society, we have formed and discipled people within society to take care of each other and to be generous and to give of their wealth. Um, so I got two pithy statements for this.
Uh-oh.
They're I think they're pithy. The first is, and this applies to welfare. This applies to any government like handout situation. If the church was doing its job, the government wouldn't have to.
Okay.
If the church was taking care of poor people, the government wouldn't have to take care of poor people. So whenever we say, "Oh, the government shouldn't do this, the government shouldn't do that," well, then the church better step up. Um, And you want to ask my opinion on how do we maybe cut back on some of the stuff the government does that a capitalist would say the government shouldn't be doing. I say, well, the church should do a better job of taking care of people. Um, so that's my first pithy statement. Um, and the second is something, and this is something I think Jordan Peterson said on Joe Rogan's podcast.
You've just
So
angered a number of people with
yeah,
that.
so everybody buckle up for this. But it really, I really like this sentence or this statement because he says there is no virtue in weakness. There is virtue in strength that is restrained. He said, "Don't be weak, be a monster, and learn how to control it." And then the the response, and I can't believe Joe Rogan said this, but Joe Rogan replied with, "Yeah, it's the old saying: better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war," which is not the same thing, but they're both. So what I'm saying is, I'm okay with us being a society of monsters if the church steps in and teaches us how to restrain it and teaches us how to control it. So like if the pastors of all these billionaires, I don't know if they have pastors, I don't know if they're in the church, um, but if their pastors teach them like the homeless problem that we have, you are in a position to help with that, and the hungry, you are in a position to help with that. No one is making you, but like that is the good thing to do for you to help these people.
Mhm.
That's what I think. If we're looking, how do you said I'm offering problems and those solutions? I think that's our solution: is we disciple people better, so that when we have wealth, we use it to help people. And I'm not saying give away everything you have, right? Because then you become someone that needs the assistance,
Mhm.
right? Sustainably help other people is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Um, so that's my quote for the day that I think I'm okay with putting on the wall. I'm okay with a society of monsters as long as we learn how to control it.
I'm gonna maybe broaden that even a little bit.
I was
I
expecting a
think
challenge, so I'm optimistic.
I mean, I think it's a bit of both. Um, so I think what you're offering in that particular situation is a way that as Christians we can within a capitalist society uh attempt to make up for some of the deficiencies in the way that our society runs, right? Like there is a great ease with which a capitalist society can lose sight of the poor, the impoverished, people who are just born into unfortunate situations. Um, that's a distinct reality. And so as the church, we can do a lot to care for those kinds of people. But I think more broadly, like regardless of what system we find ourselves in, um, economically, politically, whatever the case may be, I think as the church, we just need to be willing and prepared to analyze those systems, see where their faults are, and be prepared to hedge against them, right? So within the capitalist society, like you said, like the biggest fault is that people get left behind. Within a socialist system, if we ever find ourselves living in one, um, the biggest fault is assuming that people are, well, I guess there's a few people are selfless, that they're constantly motivated to work, and that um, they're willing to work for a greater good. Um, I think like we can encourage people within a socialist system to help benefit their society by saying, hey, as Christians, we kind of do actually want you to try and achieve these things, like to live selflessly, to um, promote
Work
the
is a
greater,
gift.
yeah, to promote the greater good of your neighbor, um, to work hard and diligently, because work can be a form of praise. Um, and so by doing so, like you are hedging against the downfall of that society. And there are other odd economic systems that, have their own strengths and weaknesses. And there are things within our teaching as the church that we can do to say, yeah, let's do what we can to support those that have been placed in power, and um, support our
And by
neighbors along the way.
support, sometimes that does include challenging them,
Yeah.
right? So let's never forget that if you really love and support someone, sometimes that means calling them out when they're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing.
Hmm.
Um,
For sure.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Are we ready for takeaways?
Um, well, let me
Or-
think. Is there anyone else we want to step on toes first? Any more enemies we want to make today?
Um, here's one more I'll make.
You're gonna say yes.
Here's one more I'll make. Um, there are some arguments within economics, especially from conservatives, that the US system of capitalism has begun to spiral downward over the last, 100, 200 years as faith in society declines. Um, and on some
Faith, like
level,
faithful people in society, or faith
yes,
in society as a construct?
both. Um, they
Okay.
both exist. Both are true. Both exist. Um, yeah, I don't think that argument holds as much water as a lot of people will give it credit for. Um, it's worth us remembering that there was a time at which black people in the southern United States were counted as three-fifths of a person. The like
Okay, hold on. Not
hang,
just the southern half of the United States, the entire United States.
enslaved people within the United States were considered three-fifths of a person. If they
There
lived
we
in the
go.
north, if they
There we
lived in the
go.
north and they were black, then they counted as a full person. Um,
No, 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 no.
yeah, yeah, they did.
For congressional population counting in the entire country, that's how they were counted.
I think you've got it wrong, Josh. I'm fairly certain here. Look it up. I'm pretty sure that it was enslaved people within the United States, especially in the southern states,
No,
because
it
that's
was
where,
significant because there were more in the southern states, and the northern states were concerned that that was going to give the southern states an incredible population control.
yes.
Um,
Either way, my point stands that like
yes, no, it's
capitalism in the United
across the
States
country, 3/5.
for enslaved
The
persons,
reason, for those of you who are like, why do you get so touchy about this? Because there are a lot of misconceptions about the North and the South. Like, everyone's slavery happened throughout the country, and
mhm,
slavery is gone throughout the country. I saw someone the other day who's like, aren't there still slaves in South Carolina? And I'm like, you are the dumbest person I've ever met in my life. Anyway, continue.
anyway, I mean, to your point, I'm pretty sure that some of the first slave ships in the United States showed up in New York. Um,
That would make sense.
anyway,
It was the economic place.
um,
Anyway,
all of all of that is to say, like, there was never a time and a place where uh faith, and especially the Christian faith, dominated the market in terms of the values. There have been ebbs and flows throughout the years where when Christianity has more influence, um, the market seems to run a little bit better because there's a little bit more care. Um, but it's not like it's been a linear thing. Um, and I think if the church does do a job well and hedges against the weaknesses of a system, like it has done in the past in different places, it certainly can be, like, we can have a society that runs pretty well. Um, but there's no guarantee with any economic or political system, um, that that is actually going to exist. And so as the church, like,
right, the church stands regardless of the economic or political system.
Yeah. And as the church, we
We are
need to be
not
prepared for any
predicated on
set of
like the
circumstances.
church comes first, y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Jesus doesn't care what everybody else says. He did what he did.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Takeaways?
Takeaways. Be a good Christian, no matter what economic system you might find yourself in.
Mm. Yeah. Um, know that there is, as far as I can tell, no Christian system of economics and politics. Um, I think the closest we can find to a biblical one is uh, a constitutional monarchy with God as king and the rest of us as peasants. Um,
Yeah.
like with no authority whatsoever. Um, God would occasionally raise up judges to make sure people were doing his law, but like that is the early system of Israel. Um, no one really had any sort of absolute authority, and
Yeah, it was street justice mostly.
yeah,
Like if you read it, it's like, oh, someone killed your family member? Well,
send
what are
the
you gonna do
Avenger
about
after
it?
them. Send your kinsman redeemer after them.
Oh,
So
they made it to a city of refuge. If they could convince those elders it was an accident, well, they're safe. You can't kill them anymore. Oh man.
yeah. So yeah, there's no, as far as I can tell, no true like fully biblical system of government outside of that. And um good luck
Theocracy,
convincing
by the way, was the word you were looking for.
a theocracy.
You said constitutional monarchy with God as king. I feel like that's just called a theocracy.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, we'll talk. Um,
We'll talk. No, we won't. I don't care that much.
that's fair. Um, but yeah. Um, God has given us the ability to govern ourselves. This is my real takeaway. God has given us the ability to govern ourselves. And whatever we do,
Cheating, taking two takeaways.
whatever system we do it in, we ought to do it wisely, and we ought to remember like what our place is in the world. Um, Acknowledge whatever weaknesses are in our system, and do what we can to serve in that system faithfully. So, yep.
Yep. All right. Prayer suggestions for you. Um, pray for the country, whatever country you happen to live in. Pray for the people in power, whether that is the government, whether that is wealthy people, like whoever's in charge. Just pray that they would be faithful, and pray that the church would be faithful and do its job in not concerning itself so much with the economics or the political system, that the church would be concerned with raising up faithful followers of Christ. Um, and now, with our shameless plugs, check out, you can subscribe to our podcast on whatever your platform of choice is. It validates us, which we appreciate. Um, and, you get notifications when we have new episodes, which is cool. Um, And we have a Facebook page if you have topic suggestions or guests. Or here's a new one. I hope someone still listens to the shameless plugs. Um, we're going to be starting season 3 soon, arbitrarily. But we kind of take the new season as a chance if we're going to implement anything new to try and improve the show. If you have ideas for that, please let us know. Either text one of us, or we have the Facebook page. You can look it up. Um, and I think that's all we got. So, with that, brothers and sisters, go in peace. Serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.